I never thought a simple question at a neighborhood barbecue would crack open the vault I'd sealed shut 4 years ago. When Elaine leaned across her pristine lawn furniture and asked if I was good in bed, her eyes twinkling with Merlot-induced mischief, I could have laughed it off. Instead, the truth I'd buried beneath years of silence came tumbling out. If you've ever held on to a secret until it became part of your bones, you might understand why this story changed everything for me, and why it might change something for you too. Stay with me until the end, I promise it's worth it. If this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that dive beneath the surface of everyday life. The day had started like any other Saturday in our suburban neighborhood. Kids racing bikes down the sidewalk, the smell of freshly cut grass hanging in the air, and the distant hum of lawnmowers creating that perfect weekend soundtrack. I'd been living in the Blue Colonial at the end of Maple Street for almost 5 years now, though the neighbors probably still thought of me as the new guy. That's what happens when you keep to yourself. I hadn't planned on attending Elaine and Richard's annual summer barbecue. The invitation had appeared in my mailbox 3 weeks earlier, and I'd tossed it onto the kitchen counter where it sat collecting coffee rings and dust. But then came the text from Elaine herself, "Please come, Daniel. It wouldn't be the same without you." A polite lie, of course. Nothing would be different if I didn't show up. I'd skipped the last 3 years of neighborhood gatherings without the world stopping on its axis. But something about the message caught me. Maybe it was the unexpected personal touch, or perhaps I was just tired of the silence in my house. Either way, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror that Saturday afternoon, attempting to remember how to make small talk while I buttoned up a shirt that hadn't seen daylight since my last job interview. Just 2 hours, I promised my reflection. Show your face, eat a burger, make an excuse about early morning plans, and leave. The party was in full swing when I arrived, the backyard transformed with string lights and colorful paper lanterns. Children chased each other around inflatable palm trees while adults clustered in small groups, plastic cups in hand. Richard manned the grill with the serious concentration of a surgeon, spatula poised above sizzling patties. "Daniel." Elaine's voice cut through the chatter as she spotted me hovering at the gate. She hurried over, her sundress catching the evening light. "You actually came." "I said I would," I replied, though we both knew my track record suggested otherwise. "Well, I'm glad. Come, let me introduce you to everyone. I've lived here 5 years, Elaine. I know who everyone is." She laughed, linking her arm through mine. Knowing names isn't the same as knowing people. The next hour passed in a blur of polite conversation and forced smiles. I answered the usual questions about my job, software development, mostly remote, my hobbies, none worth mentioning, and whether I'd thought about settling down, a question I deflected with practiced ease. By the time the sun began to set, I was mentally calculating how much longer I needed to stay before making my exit. That's when Elaine cornered me by the drinks table, away from the main crowd. Her cheeks were flushed from wine, her movement slightly looser than earlier. "So, Daniel," she said, refilling her glass. "I've always wondered about you." "What's there to wonder about?" I reached for a beer, more for something to do with my hands than any desire to drink. "You're this mystery man on our street. Handsome, successful, keeps to himself." She leaned in conspiratorially. "The book club ladies have theories." I raised an eyebrow. "Theories?" "Oh yes. Sarah thinks you're in witness protection. Margaret is convinced you're nursing a broken heart." She took a sip of wine, studying me over the rim of her glass. "Personally, I think you're just shy." "I'm not shy," I said, surprising myself with how defensive it sounded. "No?" Her smile widened. "Then what's your story? Why don't we ever see you with anyone? No girlfriend, no dates?" I shrugged, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Just haven't met the right person, I guess." She didn't look convinced. Or maybe you're just terrible in bed and word got around. She said it teasingly, clearly expecting me to laugh or fire back with some witty retort. Instead, I felt something crack inside me, a hairline fracture in the wall I'd built. Actually, I said quietly, I haven't been with anyone in 4 years. The words hung between us, heavier than I'd intended. Elaine's playful expression faltered, replaced by genuine surprise. Oh, Daniel, I was just joking around. I didn't mean to. It's fine, I cut her off, already regretting my honesty. I should probably head home. Early day tomorrow. Wait. She touched my arm lightly. Don't go. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I looked around at the party, at the couples laughing together, at Richard now dancing with their daughter on his shoulders, at the easy camaraderie I'd been watching from the outside for years. You didn't, I said finally. It's just not something I talk about. Elaine glanced toward the house. Come with me for a minute? Against my better judgment, I followed her inside, through the kitchen where platters of food waited to be carried out, and into a small study lined with bookshelves. She closed the door partway, muffling the sounds of the party. Sit, she said, gesturing to a leather armchair. Please. I sat, watching as she took the chair opposite me. The teasing glint in her eyes was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time, genuine concern. Talk to me, she said simply. Maybe it was the unexpected kindness in her voice, or the fact that I was tired, so tired, of carrying everything alone. Whatever the reason, I found myself speaking. Her name was Claire, I began, the name feeling strange on my tongue after so long. We were together for 7 years. Engaged for the last 2. Elaine nodded, waiting for me to continue. She was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia 6 months before our wedding. We thought she'd beat it, the doctors were optimistic at first. We postponed the wedding, focused on her treatment. I paused, swallowing hard. She died 3 weeks before our rescheduled date. Oh, Daniel. Elaine's voice was soft. I had no idea. No one here does. We were living in Boston then. I moved here afterward, needed a fresh start, somewhere no one knew me as the guy whose fiancée died. And you've been alone ever since? I nodded, looking down at my hands. At first, it was just grief. I couldn't imagine being with anyone else. Then it became, I don't know. Easier to be alone than to risk that kind of loss again. So when I asked if you were good in bed, a small, sad laugh escaped me. Yeah. Not exactly a question I've had to consider recently. Elaine was quiet for a moment, then said, Can I tell you something? Something I don't talk about either? I looked up, surprised by the shift. Before Richard, I was married to someone else. His name was James. She twisted the gold band on her finger. He wasn't a good man, Daniel. The kind of not good that leaves bruises where clothes can hide them. My eyes widened slightly, but I remained silent. When I finally left him, I was convinced I'd never trust anyone again. I'd build this life where I didn't need anyone, where I was safe. She smiled faintly. I lived that way for 3 years. And then I met Richard at a friend's wedding. He asked me to dance, and I said no about 5 times before saying yes. What changed your mind? I asked. Honestly? I was tired. Tired of being afraid, tired of letting what happened define my future. She leaned forward. The thing about walls, Daniel, is that they keep others out, but they also keep us in. We sat in silence for a moment, the muffled sounds of laughter and music filtering through the door. I'm not saying you should start dating tomorrow, she continued. Grief doesn't have a timeline. But maybe it's time to at least open a window in that wall. Before I could respond, the door pushed open and Richard poked his head in. There you are. We're about to cut the cake, and the kids are getting restless. Elaine stood, smoothing her dress. We'll be right there. She turned to me. Coming? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. I'll be out in a minute. After they left, I sat alone in the quiet study, surrounded by books and photographs of a family's life together. On the desk was a picture of Elaine and Richard on their wedding day, both beaming at the camera. Next to it was a more recent photo, the two of them with their children at what looked like a beach vacation, all sun-kissed and laughing. I thought about Claire then. Not about her illness or the hospital rooms or the funeral I could barely remember through the fog of grief. Instead, I remembered her laugh, how it would burst out of her unexpectedly, how she'd cover her mouth as if surprised by her own joy. I remembered dancing with her in our old apartment's tiny kitchen, no music playing except the rhythm we created together. For the first time in years, those memories didn't feel like daggers. They felt like gifts. Precious moments I'd been fortunate enough to experience, even if they ended too soon. When I finally rejoined the party, something had shifted. I didn't suddenly become the life of the gathering, but I stayed until the end, helping Richard fold chairs while Elaine packed leftover food into containers. Take some home, she insisted, pressing a plate covered in foil into my hands. And Daniel? Our door is always open. Not just for parties. I nodded, understanding what she was offering. Thank you. For everything tonight. That's what neighbors are for, she said with a warm smile. Walking home under the stars, I felt lighter somehow. Nothing had changed, Claire was still gone, and I was still alone, but something had loosened inside me. A first breath after being underwater too long. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my doorbell. When I opened the door, bleary-eyed and still in my pajamas, I found a small basket on my porch. Inside was a loaf of what looked like homemade bread, a jar of jam, and a note in Elaine's handwriting. Book club meets Thursdays at 7. We're reading that thriller everyone's talking about, but honestly, we mostly drink wine and gossip. No pressure, but there's always an extra chair. I stood there for a long moment, the morning sun warm on my face. Then I picked up the basket and brought it inside, placing it on my kitchen counter, not off to the side where it would be forgotten, but right in the center where I'd see it every day. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since moving to Maple Street. I walked to the local bookstore and bought a copy of the thriller everyone was apparently talking about. The cashier, a woman about my age with curly hair and glasses, smiled as she rang me up. Good choice, she said. The ending will surprise you. I hope so, I replied, and realized I meant it. After 4 years of carefully avoiding surprises, of keeping each day as predictable as the one before, I was ready for something different. I didn't make it to book club that Thursday. Some walls take more than one conversation to come down. But the following week, I found myself walking up Elaine and Richard's driveway at 6:55 p.m., book in hand, heart hammering in my chest. Through the front window, I could see a group of women gathered in the living room, wine glasses in hand, laughing about something. For a moment, I almost turned around. Then the door opened, and Elaine stood there, surprise and delight spreading across her face. You came, she said. I did, I replied, holding up my book. Fair warning, I haven't finished it yet. She laughed, stepping aside to let me in. Neither has half the club. Come on, I'll introduce you. As I followed her into the warmth and noise of her home, I thought about Claire again. About how she'd always pushed me to be braver than I thought I could be. How she'd believed in connections, in reaching out, in letting people in. I think you'd approve, I whispered to her memory. I'm trying. And for the first time in 4 years, that trying felt like enough. The book club became a weekly fixture in my life. Then came Richard's poker nights, neighborhood cleanup days, and eventually, dinner with Sarah from across the street, just as friends at first, both of us carrying our own histories of loss, neither rushing toward anything more. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still days when grief hit me like a physical force, when I'd close all the curtains and retreat into myself. But those days grew fewer, and I learned that letting people in, even just a little, meant I didn't have to face them alone anymore. 6 months after that fateful barbecue question, I found myself back in Elaine and Richard's backyard for their holiday party. As I stood by the fire pit, watching neighbors I now knew by more than just their names, Elaine appeared at my side. "So," she said with that familiar mischievous smile, "I never did get an answer to my original question." I laughed, shaking my head. "And you're not going to?" "Fair enough." She clinked her glass against mine. "You know, when you first moved here, I told Richard there was something special about you. He thought I was being nosy, but I just had this feeling." "A feeling?" "That you were someone worth knowing." She glanced across the yard to where Sarah was helping Richard hang more lights. "Seems I was right." I followed her gaze, warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for not letting me walk away that night." "That's the thing about neighbors," she replied. "Sometimes they see the light in your windows when you think you're sitting in the dark." As the party continued around us, I realized something important. Healing doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a neighbor's persistent kindness, in the courage to speak a truth you've kept hidden, in the simple act of showing up when every instinct tells you to stay away. 4 years is a long time to be alone with your grief. But it's never too late to open the door and let the world back in, even if you do it one neighbor, one book club, one honest conversation at a time. If you've ever held yourself back from connection because of past pain, I hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to begin again. Sometimes the most profound healing starts with the simplest question, even one as unexpected as, "Are you good in bed?" The answer might surprise you.